Taking a look at the Lockheed Martin Armed Forces Bowl, Thursday, December 31st, New Year's Eve. Tulsa 6-2, runner-up in the American Conference, playing Mississippi State 3-7, sixth in the SEC West. Yes, 3-7, but we've got the Bulldogs in a bowl game. And what's interesting is you're looking at a 3-7 team out of the SEC, just a 2.5-point dog against Tulsa, runner-up to Cincinnati. Who made sort of was the group of five representative in New Year's Six Bowl. So real interesting line here for this game. Real interesting matchup. Let's look at the teams a little bit. Tulsa averaging 27 points a game, 164 on the ground, 240 in the air. Their defense allowing 20 points a game, 145 on the ground, 194 in the air. We know the Bulldogs are going to be pass heavy in their offense. They're only averaging 36 rushing yards per game, 36. They're averaging over 311 passing yards a game, giving up 28 points a game, 125 on the ground, 255 in the air. So let's take a look at the schedule. See if we can find some of these schedules within a schedule, because we know the Bulldogs have only played an SEC only schedule. So, that throws things off this year. Keep in mind, these SEC teams year in, year out, they're usually playing sometimes 3 or 4 non-conference games. So Mississippi State sitting at 3-7 right now. You give them 3 non-conference games earlier in the year, this could be one of those 5 or 6 win bowl. This could be one of those 6-win bowl teams if they had 3 easier preseason matchups along the way. So let's not completely throw them out. When you look at the schedule, remember they opened the year with that win against LSU, which everyone was ranting and raving about, the Leach offense coming into the SEC. They dropped that game against Arkansas 21-14. They lost at Kentucky 24-20, where basically it was their offense that was just anemic. They lost at A&M by 2 touchdowns. They got throttled by Alabama 41-0. They held on to beat Vanderbilt 24-17, which I believe they were up by 2 or 3 scores in that game. And then you look at Georgia, the losses at Georgia, at Ole Miss. They only allowed 31 points a game. And so, and then you look at the loss to Auburn 24-10. And then they ended the year on an upswing with a win over Missouri 51-32. So the question is, are the Bulldogs coming in sort of reinvigorated, looking at this as a new season, new slate, 3-7, bad year? But will they be up for the bowl game? Because on the flip side, on the other side of the ball, we've got Tulsa, who really, lost the opener in the beginning of the year, 16-7 at Oklahoma State. And that was more, at the time, that was more of an indictment against Oklahoma State. We held that against Oklahoma State. But now looking back at it, that game was actually more impressive for Tulsa now, holding Oklahoma State to 16 points. Unfortunately, they were only to score 7, but that was a close game. Then you look at a win, 1-score win against Central Florida. They had to win at South Florida. 1-score win against East Carolina. 4-point win against East Carolina. 4-point win against SMU. The overtime win against Tulane. At Navy, they won 19-6, and then they lost a close win in the American Championship game, 27-24 to Cincinnati. And so, unlike Mississippi State, who's probably thankful they're in a bowl game, can kind of hit the reset button a little bit, prepare for a new game, prepare for a non-SEC team against Tulsa, who's coming off of a loss in a conference championship game after a really good year. And I think now with the Golden Hurricane, you have to wonder, okay, they're playing an SEC school that's only 3-7. They're probably going to be up for this. What American Conference team isn't going to be motivated to play an SEC school? But they're coming off a conference championship loss, and you just wonder about the motivation. For me, I question whether or not there's a lot of motivation on the Tulsa side, other than the fact that they're playing an SEC school. But they look across the way and they say, okay, SEC school 3-7. I worry about the motivation, the psychological standpoint from Tulsa. I think this might favor a little bit more Mississippi State, because they probably feel unfortunate they're in this game. With that being said, that's sort of the numbers within the numbers. Tulsa opening up a 2.5-point favorite. The total's at 50.5. And when you look at some of the scores in which these teams played, that seems like a good number. I think we're going to have a very defensive-oriented game. Tulsa's defense has been pretty good. But still, I think 50.5 might be a little low for this game. But let's look at some of the key players. Obviously, Zach Smith, the quarterback for Tulsa, he's in there. He did suffer an injury in that game to Tulane. He was able to return and almost eked out a win in that American Conference Championship game against Cincinnati. Running back has been more of a committee approach for Tulsa this year between Corey Taylor, TK Wilkerson, Deneric Prince. At times, different guys. It seemed like when Wilkerson was healthy, he was going to be the running back one. But as of late, going into the bowl game, it looks like I'd favor more Corey Taylor the second in this matchup if I had to lean on a back a running back in the Tulsa backfield. As far as playmakers on the outside, Tulsa goes about 4 deep at receiver between Keelan Stokes, Josh Johnson, J.C. Santana, Sam Crawford Jr. When you look across the board, Stokes leads the team with 527 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Josh Johnson leads the team with receiving touchdowns with 37 catches. Santana, 30 catches, 4 touchdowns. Sam Crawford has had 24. He had 24 catches and a touchdown. He's been a little banged up. So you've got some diversity in the receiving core with Tulsa. You've got 4 guys who can make plays as long as they can get open against that Mississippi State secondary. And when you look on the other side of the ball, you do not think of a Leach team devoid of talent at receiver, but we just wonder, the problem with Mississippi State is being able to pull it in at quarterback this year. Whether it was KJ Costello, Will Rogers, my guess is we're probably going to see Will Rogers in this game. 10 touchdown passes on the season. The way they utilize the running backs out of the backfield, Jaquavius Marks, Dylan Johnson, both of those guys. Marks has 56 receptions this year. I think you're going to see both of those guys get some receptions out of the backfield. If I had to lean one way or the other, I know they were kind of mixed up during the season here or there, but Marks has been more of the favored back for most of the season, at least most of the second half of the season. If you were to invest in a back in this game, I'm going to go with Marks, particularly if you're playing in a PPR. Right now, our projections have him with 4 receptions for this game. It wouldn't surprise me if he gets closer to 6 to 7 receptions in this game against that Tulsa defense. As far as the receivers go, Jaden Walley has really emerged as the best receiver in the Mississippi State offense over the second half of the season. You still have to, he's got 48 receptions, 691 yards, 2 touchdowns. You still have to account for Osiris Mitchell. You still have to account for Austin Williams. Tulsa defense still has to account for Malik Heath. All of those guys have at least 34 receptions and 3 touchdowns this year, with the exception of Wally. He's only got a couple of touchdowns. So their leading receiver on the year has 2 touchdowns. Osiris Mitchell, 4. Austin Williams, 3 touchdowns. Malik Heath, 3. And of course, there's some other complementary pieces in that Mississippi State passing game. But if I had to lean one player in this matchup for Mississippi State, other than probably Will Rogers, as long as he's cemented in as that quarterback one, I think you look at him, it's Jaden Walley, who ended the year on a high note in that Mississippi State offense. If I had to look at someone on the Tulsa side, I'm a little leery to play the running backs just because there's been so much rotation during the year. And really, it's a mixed bag with Tulsa receivers. I really think you're playing the lottery if you select one of those guys too. And when you look at the matchup, I don't necessarily know if this matchup favors Zach Smith and the Mississippi State passing game anyway. So I don't know if, when I look at this matchup, I just don't know how we're going to get to 50.5 points in this game. But keep in mind, this is a bowl game. Anything can happen. And so Tulsa opening up as a 2.5 point favorite, 50.5. I look at some of the scores. Cincinnati in the AAC championship game, that was at 51. Mississippi State played Missouri last game of the year. That game ended up 73. There haven't been many games this year where these teams have played a total over 50.5. But these bowl games can be sometimes a little weird. Sometimes they can be a little bit out of the, out of what we expected, out of the norm. And for that reason, this is here's my pick. And it's really odd. It's unusual we get a 3-7 team in a bowl game this year. But for some reason, I like the way Mississippi State ended the year against Missouri on a high note. I think they're going to come in with some confidence in this bowl game and try to use this as a springboard into 2021. And maybe Mike Leach kind of throws some wrinkles in there to prepare for this game. And I think they'll be a little more motivated. Whereas even though Tulsa is going to be motivated to play an SEC school, Mississippi State has struggled. Tulsa's defense is good. They almost eked out that win against Cincinnati. But with the regular season lasting so much longer this year into December, you just wonder about the time off for these teams to have, to recalibrate, to kind of get their psyche back together. And I just wonder where Tulsa's going to be after losing a conference championship game. I could be completely out. I could completely whiff on this one, but something inside of me makes me feel as if Mississippi State is a dangerous dog in this game. 3-7 SEC team playing a 6-2 conference runner-up, 2.5 point spread. I'm going to take the dogs in this one. I'm going to go with Mississippi State. And I think this one does get over 50.5. I'm going to go for it to go slightly over. So for my pick, Lockheed Martin Armed Forces Bowl, it's going to be Mississippi State minus the 2.5 and over the total of 50.5.